Good evening, everybody. Thank you, boys, for joining us tonight. Thank you, esteemed members of staff. And thank you as well to those who are joining us through the virtual link. I'm so sorry that we can't have you with us this evening, but I'm sure you'll enjoy the fantastic display that these boys have prepared for you tonight. I'd like to say a huge thank you to these boys who've worked so hard to get into the final, but also to all the boys who've taken the time to learn their declamation piece. And thanks as well to the parents who've supported them to get them to this stage. It was an incredibly tough situation to be in to judge who was going to make it through. But I'm always amazed by the range of pieces that we're able to have on display. And thank you very much for making this such a good competition. I'd like to say a huge thank you to my department, to Mr. Chapman, Man McLeod, and Mr. Fife. I know they've done so much to support and guide you boys towards this evening. And I would also like to say a huge thank you to Mr. Alexander Nash, who joins us this evening from Radley College. Now, you may know that our tradition of declamations comes from Radley. A former headmaster of ours brought the idea across, and we've been running these competitions ever since. So I really look forward to your expert guidance and the thoughts that you have for our boys. Finally, I think without any further ado, I think we shall get to our first year group, which will be the third form. So thank you very much. Enjoy.
Titus Andronicus, Act 5, Scene 2, by William Shakespeare. Come, Lavinia. Look, thy foes are bound. Sirs, stop their mouths. Let them not speak to me, but let them hear what fearful words I utter. O villains, Chiron and Demetrius, here stands the spring whom you have stained with mud. This goodly summer with your winter mixed. You killed her husband, and for that vile fault 2 of her brothers were condemned to death. My hand cut off and made a merry jest. Both her sweet hands, her tongue, and that's more than hands or tongue, her spotless chastity, inhuman traitors, you constrained and forced. What would you say if I should let you speak? Villains, for shame, you could not beg for grace. Hark, wretches, how I mean to martyr you. This one hand yet is left to cut your throats. Whilst that Lavinia, between her stumps, doth hold the basin that receives your guilty blood. You know your mother means to feast with me, and calls herself revenge, thinks me mad. Hark, villains, I will grind your bones to dust, and with your blood and it I'll make a paste, with a paste, a coffin, I will rear and make 2 pasties of your shameful heads, and bid that strumpet, your unhallowed dam, like to the earth, swallow her own increase. This is the feast that I have bid her to. This is the banquet she shall serve bet on. For worse than Philomel, you use my daughter. For worse than Progne, I will be revenged. And now, prepare your throats. Lavinia, come, receive the blood. For when they're dead, let me go grind their bones to powder small, and with this hateful liquor temper it. And in that haste, let their vile heads be baked. Come, be ever officious, to make this banquet, which I wish may prove more stern and bloody than the centaur's feast. So now, bring them in, for I'll play the cook, and see them ready, 'gainst their mother comes. Refugees by Brian Bilston. They have no need of our help, so do not tell me these haggard faces could belong to you or I should life have dealt a different hand. We need to see them for who they really are. Chancers and scroungers, layabouts and loungers with bombs up their sleeves, cutthroats and thieves. They are not welcome here. We should make them go back to where they came from. They cannot share our food, share our homes, share our countries. Instead, let us build a wall to keep them out. It is not okay to say, these are people just like us. A place should only belong to those who are born there. Do not be so stupid to think that the world can be looked at another way. The world can be looked at another way. Do not be so stupid to think that a place should only belong to those who are born there. These are people, just like us. They are not... Oh, God. Yeah, sorry. These are people, just like us. This is not okay to say build a wall to keep them out. Instead, let us share our countries, share our homes, share our food. They cannot go back to where they came from. We should make them welcome here. They are not cutthroats and thieves with bombs up their sleeves, layabouts and loungers, chancers and scroungers. We need to see them for who they really are. Should life have dealt a different hand, these haggard faces could belong to you or I. So do not tell me they have no need of our help.
Hope by Anthony Horowitz. The town of Hope near Aberdeen is somewhere I have seldom been. But then, it's not a tourist trap. It isn't even on the map. There's certainly not much to see. They've closed the local library because they said there is no need when no one in the town can read. They've got a pub and a hotel, but neither of them's doing well. The hotel isn't quite the Ritz. The beds have fleas, the staff have nits. The only pub, the Rose and Crown, is easily the worst in town. The one theatre's sadly gone. It burnt down while a play was on. The critics thought the play so dire that all of them preferred the fire. The cinema is second-rate. The films are always out of date. The last James Bond film that I saw had Bond still played by Roger Moore. The pavements are never clean because the council's far too mean to pay for cleaners, and the park is only open after dark. The grass is lumpy, full of weeds, and dogs can only walk on leads. They've got a children's playground, but when school is finished, it is shut. The chief of police is 82. He can't catch crooks. He can't catch flu. The vicar surely won't be missed, since he's become an atheist. The mayor sold his golden chain and then was never seen again. The local paper isn't bought because there's nothing to report. The school is like a concrete bunker. Matron's drunk. The head is drunker. Now, living here must really stink. At least that's what you might think. That is simply not the case. There is no more delightful place. The fun and laughter never ends, and everyone is best of friends. And all the residents agree there's nowhere else they'd rather be. So if you're feeling uninspired, sleeping badly, waking tired, if everything is going wrong, the days feel dark, the nights too long, remember all the people who have found the following is true. It's so much easier to cope if you decide to live in hope.
Blackberry Picking by Seamus Heaney. Late August, given heavy rain and sun, for a full week the blackberries had ripened. At first, just one, a glossy purple clot, among others, red-green, hard as a knot. You ate that first one, its flesh was sweet, like thickened wine. Summer's blood was in it, leaving stains upon the tongue and lust for picking. Then red ones, inked up, and that hunger sent us out with milk cans, pea tins, jam pots, where briars scratched and wet grass bleached our boots. Round hayfields, cornfields, potato drills, we trekked and picked until the cans were full, until the tinkling bottom had been covered with green ones, and on top, big, dark blobs burned like a plate of eyes. Our hands were peppered with thorn pricks, our palms as sticky as bluebirds. We hoarded the fresh berries in the byre, but when the bath was filled, we found a fur, a rat-grey fungus glutting on our cash. The juice was stinking too. Once off the bush, the fruit fermented. The sweet flesh returned sour. I always felt like crying. It wasn't fair that all the lovely camphor smelt of rot. Each year, I hoped they'd keep. Knew they would not.
The Everlasting Gobstopper by Roald Dahl. I congratulate you, little boy. Well done. You found the 5th golden ticket. Now, may I introduce myself? Arthur Slugworth, President of Slugworth Chocolates Incorporated. Now, listen very carefully, because I'm going to make you very rich indeed. Mr. Wonka's working on a fantastic invention, the everlasting gobstopper. If he succeeds, he'll ruin me! So, all I want you to do is get hold of just one everlasting gobstopper and bring it to me so that I can find the secret formula. And you will be rewarded 10,000 of these. Think it over, will you? A new home for your family, and good food, and comfort for the rest of their lives. And don't forget the name. Everlasting Gobstopper.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real special treat, really, to get out of Radley and to come down the road and see you all and hear you all. I was hugely, hugely impressed. And I haven't written the same thing on any two of these little boxes because you all chose really interesting, completely different pieces. Last week, I judged the semi-finals of the Radley Declamation, which I gather is the kind of inspiration for this. And I have to say, there were some boys, you know, a good deal older than you, choosing much less interesting things. I gather these are all your own choices, and delivering them, you know, in less interesting ways. I thought you did brilliantly. So let that just go as a kind of footnote to all the rest of the comments I'm going to give you. But I'll just give each of you a little bit of feedback, and then I'll make a really, really difficult decision, and I'll explain why, inevitably, in many people's opinion, that will be wrong. But I have to just give you a subjective view. First of all, Akam, I thought this was a really brave choice. It's a fantastically unpleasant bit of Shakespeare, Titus, and that speech in particular. And I was a little bit worried, I have to say, when I got sent the pieces beforehand, that dealing with blank verse, iambic pentameter, dealing with all that repetition. There's a lot of and, that kind of anaphora we call it, and I thought it might be a bit boring actually, even though it's gruesome, even though it's horrible, but you controlled it beautifully, really, really nicely. And you handled the kind of rhythm that's there in the iambic pentameter, but you also managed to kind of change directions extremely well, very, very sensitive. There was a great sense of relish. You seemed really unpleasant, and I'm sure you're not, so that's greatly to your credit. I thought that was excellent. Well done. There was a lot of acting in all of these, and it was a brilliant start to have such a kind of a character inhabited in that way. So well done, that was brilliant. And then we had Rafe doing Refugees. Again, a poem I know a little bit, and I thought, is he really going to do it all the way through and then flip it and go all the way back? And you did really, really bravely. It's another interesting choice, much more humane choice than the first one in lots of ways. And I think actually you got the message across of the poem very nicely indeed, in a really mature way. And what I think is tricky with a piece like that, obviously, is having to go back on yourself and to remember. And even though there are little moments where you found that hard, it was excellent that you kept going, because that's a hard thing to do. So massive kudos to you, a great choice, very, very clear as well. All of them, just crystal clear, really brilliant. You've obviously been taught very well and you're obviously very able, so well done. And then we had Louis with Hope, not a poem I knew very well. You made it seem really personal. It felt like you were talking to everybody in the room, which is very hard to handle. It involves looking at people, which I'm not very good at. I get very nervous about. I thought you did that exceptionally well. There were some changes in tone, which I thought you dealt with nicely. Again, I looked at this in advance and I thought the rhyme can be a problem. It makes it a bit easier to memorize sometimes, but it can feel a bit monotonous. Like, because all those lines are going to rhyme with each other, it can feel a little bit list-like. But what you did nicely was to create a sense of momentum, and we got to the end that you controlled extremely well, that we felt we'd got to the climax exactly as you'd wanted us to. So, excellent, well done. Now, I was excited about hearing Blackberry Picking, because it's one of my favourite poems, and we do a lot of Seamus Heaney in secondary school. And equally, I was a bit nervous because I love Seamus Heaney so much that I didn't want somebody to do it not very well. And you did it brilliantly, so I was really, really delighted. A great sense at the beginning of the poem of that excitement, that fervour, that discovery, and then what Heaney does, and you communicated so well, was this darkening tone, this things going wrong. And I don't know if you've read Death of a Naturalist, but I would really recommend that as another really good Heaney poem which does that. I thought you controlled the whole thing really well, particularly just the last couplet I thought was spot on. You did that nicely. It's quite difficult to slow down at the end when you desperately probably want to get finished. But I thought you were excellent, really well done. And then we had Sebastian, who did an excerpt from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which was brave in a different way because it's a little bit shorter than some of the other pieces. And what you had to do in that tiny bit of time there, it's prose as well, a little bit of time, was to really inhabit a character from almost a standing start and make us believe that you're this deeply kind of oily, oleaginous, unpleasant person, which I thought you did really well. And again, some excellent acting on show. You worked loads of character into a very shortish piece. I thought your tone of voice was great, excellent control. Again, this was impressive with all of you, but maybe mostly I thought I really enjoyed the way you paused at the end and just allowed us to kind of just take a minute over the ending of yours. And that's very brave, very, very difficult. So, the standard was fantastically high, and I know there'll be 4 very disappointed people, inevitably, but none of you should be. You should all be extremely proud of what you've achieved. I thought that was, as good as I could have imagined and hoped for with those pieces. I have made a choice, but I could probably have chosen any of you, really. In the end, I thought, because it was extremely difficult, very brave, profoundly unpleasant as a kind of the subject matter, but also dealing with iambic pentameter, blank verse, all that sort of thing. I thought in the end my personal choice was Akam, so really, really well done. Maybe a round of applause. Would you like to come up, Akam, and receive your prize? Well done. That was great. Thank you very much.
After water. by Robert Burns. Flow gently, sweet Afton, among thy green braes. Flow gently, I'll sing thee a song in thy praise. My Mary's asleep by a murmuring stream. Flow gently, sweet Afton, disturb not her dream. Thou stock dove, whose echo resounds through the glen, ye wild twisting blackbirds in yon thorny den. Thou green-crested lapwing, thy screaming forebear, I charge you disturb not my slumbering fair. How lofty, sweet Afton, thy neighbouring hills, far marked are the courses of clear winding rills. There daily I wander as noon rises high, my flocks and my Mary's sweet cross in my eye. How pleasant thy banks and green valleys below, where wild in the woodlands the primroses blow. There oft as mild evening sweeps over the lea, a sweet-scented bird shows my Mary and me. The crystal stream Afton, how lovely it glides, and the wind by the cot where my Mary resides. How wanton thy waters her snowy feet lave, as gathering sweet flowerets she stems thy clear wave. Flow gently, sweet Afton, among thy green braes. Flow gently, sweet river, a theme of my lays. My Mary's asleep by thy murmuring stream. Flow gently, sweet Afton, disturb not her dream.
Earth Eyes by Amanda Gorman. What have we done? Currently, our jaw is clamped down, shoulders nailed to the ears, bones braced for brutal battle. By think of the next generation, we mean every day this very ground spoils beneath us, for we are bringing to all the ends of the earth, the end of all the earth. Please believe us when we say we too ache to imagine something new. Reparation lies not in the land we own, but in the land we owe, the soil and toil we thieved in from the start. Nothing is a grander cemetery than this. Water drinkable, our air breathable, birds built and blurred on a breeze, trees giving huge sighs into the heavens, our children giggling and gilded in grass. Earnest for the first time, we must earn this turned earth back. Now we are begged to save it. We screech with kids who must fix the world because braving it is no longer enough. The youth will save us, they say, but even that is its own release. Our short lives now aimed at the oily-headed monsters that reared their teeth long before we even gave our first wet croak. Generations of the past order, be our recruits, not our rescues. Oh, how we want our parents red and restless, as wild and dying for a difference as we are.
Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. I met a traveller from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless things of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor, well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Run its cave, a colossal wreck, boundless and bare. The lonely level sands stretch far away.
The
Seven Ages of Man, from As You Like It, by William Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women are merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man, in his time, plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail, unwillingly to school. Then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honour, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. Then the justice, in fair round belly, with good cape onlined, with eyes severe, and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances, and so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into a lean, slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful host, well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank and big manly voice, turning again toward the childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, which ends this strange, eventful history, is second to childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
Valery Legasov's last audio recording by Craig Mason. What is the cost of lies? It's not that one mistake them for the truth. The real danger is that if we hear enough lies, then we no longer recognise the truth at all. What can we do then? What else is left but to abandon even the hope of truth and content ourselves instead with stories? In these stories, it doesn't matter who the heroes are. All we want to know is who is to blame. Well, in this story, it was Anatoly Dyatlov, and he was the best choice. An arrogant, unpleasant man, he ran the room that night. He gave the orders, and no friends, or at least not important ones. And now Dyatlov will spend the next 10 years in a prison labour camp. Of course, that sentence is doubly unfair. There are far greater criminals than him at work. As for what Dyatlov did do, the man doesn't deserve prison. He deserves death. But instead, 10 years for criminal mismanagement, what does that mean? No one knows, and it doesn't matter. What does matter is that to them, justice was done. Because you see, a just world is a sane world. There was nothing sane about Chernobyl. What happened there, what happened after, even the good, we did. All of it, madness.
I get the sense that it's not going to be an easy year group to judge. Unfortunately, you were, as the first group, really superb, and some extraordinary choices, frankly. The last speech is a really brilliant one, but not one I've heard done. I've judged a few of these things, and well done for choosing it. But also we had a few more perhaps more popular declamations here, which again is tricky in its way, because you can kind of guarantee people will have heard an Ozymandias or an All the World's a Stage. So to do that, again, it is taking on lots of people's kind of previous efforts in a way. So well done, all of you. We'll start with Jackson, who did some Robert Burns. well done for not doing it in a Scottish accent. I think that was a good decision. I think you let your own character come through and speak for yourself. We have a Burns night dinner at Radley, and I've been to a few, and people putting on a Scottish accent to do Robert Burns is pretty... it's tricky to hear, and you did that really nicely, better than a lot of the Radley Dons do at this Burns night dinner. I thought you were really measured, you enunciated beautifully, very, very clear. Some of the vocabulary is very difficult in Robert Burns, but I thought you handled it really, really nicely, so well done. Excellent. And then we had Toby doing something from almost the kind of absolute diametric opposite, the most modern thing perhaps in the whole lot, this Amanda Gorman poem. Now, she's pretty well known for the inauguration speech, but this was not a poem I knew very well, but I thought you handled the internal rhyme really nicely. There's a lot of alliteration, assonance, it kind of feels slightly repetitive when you look at it on the page, but the way she does it and the way you did it felt great. It felt like every line was a new kind of part of the story. I'm not normally a huge fan of kind of shape poetry, but I thought you did it really nicely. And you kind of opened it up during the middle portion using the vowel sounds, and you communicated that righteous anger really very well indeed. So well done. Then we had an Ozymandias. I actually taught Ozymandias today, and so I felt a little bit trepidatious about hearing it again, but you did it brilliantly, Cotty. I thought that was excellent. A real communication of revelation, of glory, and then that change in tone where we realise, obviously, this person's statue has been destroyed and his empire's come to naught. I thought it was brilliant. You communicated the barrenness at the end of the poem with the kind of pace of your delivery very maturely indeed. It was great. Well done. And then we had Angus, who did All the World's a Stage. I've heard All the World's a Stage a lot of times. I thought you did it really nicely. And the one thing I thought was perhaps best about it was the way you moved between the ages using your voice. There were lots of little vocal tricks going on. And honestly, I thought at the beginning, I hope it's not going to be too tricksy, but it worked really nicely. I thought you measured it very, very well. You clearly understood, what was going on, which with Shakespeare you sometimes feel a bit worried about whether you actually are going to understand it, but you obviously did. You slowed down really nicely just to let that last line hang in the air, where actually what's a kind of funny speech in places ends on that note of, I wouldn't say a wholly optimistic note actually, and you did that very, very well indeed. And then Wolfston, I mentioned the choice already, but I thought this was a brilliant choice, and very, very movingly done, actually. It's a very moving moment in the television programme. I thought you did it really well. There was a lovely sense of the character, quite hard to do when there's been a famous recent TV kind of performance, but you made it your own. I thought it was great. There was an excellent sense that during the speech, the character was kind of working things out for themselves. I didn't feel as though you were reading something that you knew was going to go where it went, if that makes sense. It felt like every line was kind of a kind of bit of a revelation. So well done. Again, I will just reiterate probably every time I come up that this is almost certainly, in many people's eyes, the wrong choice. So I'm sorry. In the end, for me, and again, it is subjective, I thought Toby's Amanda Gorman was my favourite because he managed to take somebody's poetry, which is very fresh, very new, kind of, I think, rather wonderful, but also quite difficult to appropriate and to take for yourself. So I thought you made it really moving, that middle section particularly. So well done, Toby. I thought you were my pick of the fourth form. Well done.
The Darkling Thrush by Thomas Hardy. I leant upon a coppice gate when frost was spectre grey, and winter's dregs made desolate the weakening eye of day. The tangled vine stems scored the sky like strings of broken lyres, and all mankind that haunted lie had sought their household fires. The land's sharp features seemed to me the century's corpse outlent,
its crypt the cloudy canopy, the wind its death lament. The ancient pulse of germ and birth was shrunken hard and dry, and every spirit upon earth seemed fervorless as I. At once a voice arose among the bleak twigs overhead, in a full-hearted evensong of joy illimited. An aged thrush, frail, gaunt and small, with blast breath of plume, had chosen thus to fling his soul upon the growing gloom. So little cause for carolings of such ecstatic sound was written on terrestrial things, afar or nigh around, that I could think there trembled through his happy good-night air some blessed hope, whereof he knew, and I was unaware.
An extract from the Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I am 5 when it is my father's turn to host the games. Men gather from as far as Thessaly and Sparta, and our storehouses grow rich with their gold. 100 servants work for 20 days, beating out the racing track and clearing it of stones. My father is determined to have the finest games of his generation. I remember the runners best, nut brown bodies slicked with oil, stretching on the track beneath the sun. They mixed together, broad-shouldered husbands, beardless youths and boys, their calves all thickly carved with muscle. The bull has been killed, sweating the last of its blood into dust and dark bronze bowls. It went quietly to its death, a good omen for the games to come. The runners are gathered before the dais, where my father and I sit, surrounded by prizes that we will give to the winners. Their golden mixing bowls for wine, beaten bronze tripods, ashwood spears tipped with precious iron. But the real prize is in my hands. A wreath of dusty green leaves, freshly clipped, rubbed to a shine by my thumb. My father has given it to me grudgingly. He reassures himself, all I have to do is hold it. The youngest boys are running first, and they wait, shuffling their feet in the sand for the nod from the priest. Then their first flush of growth, bones sharp and spindly, poking against taut skin. My eye catches on a light head among dozens of dark tousled crowns. I lean forward to see, hair lit like honey in the sun, and within it, glints of gold, the circlet of a prince. He is shorter than the others, and still plump with childhood in a way they are not. His hair is long and tied back with leather. It burns against the dark, bare skin of his back. His face, when he turns, is as serious as a man's. The priest strikes the ground. He slips past the thickened bodies of the older boys. He moves easily, his heels flashing pink as licking tongues. He wins! I stare as my father lifts the garland from my lap and crowns him. The leaves seem almost black against the brightness of his hair. His father, Peleus, comes to claim him, smiling and proud. Peleus' kingdom is smaller than ours, but his wife is rumored to be a goddess, and his people love him. My own father watches with envy. His wife is stupid, and his son too slow to race in even the youngest group. He turns to me. That is what a son should be.
Blessed by emptiest darker. The skin cracks like a pod. There never is enough water. Imagine the drip of it, the small splash echo in a tin mug, the voice of a kindly God. Sometimes a sudden rush of fortune. The municipal pipe bursts, silver crashes to the ground, and the flow has found a roar of tongues. From the hut, a congregation, every man, woman, child, the streets around, butts in with pots, brass, copper, aluminium, plastic buckets, frantic hands, and naked children screaming in the liquid sun, their highlights polished to perfection, flashing light as the blessing sings over their small bones.
Beethoven by Shane Koizan. Listen, his father made a habit out of hitting him. You see, some men drink, some men yell, some men hit their children. This man did it all, because I guess all men want their boys to be geniuses. Beethoven, little boy living in a house where a name meant nothing, living in a house where mercy had to be earned through each perfect note, tumbling through the roof to tickle the toes of angels, whose hearts controlled half the passion that was held in the hands of a young boy who was hard of hearing. Beethoven, who heard his father's anthem every time he put his finger to ivory, it was not good enough, so he played slowly, not good enough, so he played softly, not good enough, so he played strongly, not good enough. And when he could play no more, and his fingers cramped up like the gnarled roots of tree trunks, it was not good enough. Beethoven, a musician without his most precious tools, his eardrums, could no longer pound out the rhythms for the symphonies playing in his mind. He couldn't hear the audiences clapping. He couldn't hear the people loving him. He couldn't hear the women in the front row whispering, Beethoven, as they let the music invade their nervous systems, like an armada, marching through, firing cannonballs, detonating every molecule of their body into explosions of heavenly sensation, leaving track marks over every inch of that body, making them ache for one more hit. He was an addiction. And kings, queens, it didn't matter. The man got down on his knees for no one, but amputated the legs of his piano so he could feel the vibrations through the floor. The man got down on his knees for music. And when the orchestras played his symphonies, it was the echoes of his father's anthem repeating itself like a broken record, broken record. It was not good enough, so they played slowly. Not good enough, so they played softly. Not good enough, so they played strongly. Not good enough! So they tried to mock the man, make fun of the madness, by mimicking the movements, by holding their bows a quarter of an inch above the strings, not making a sound. It was perfect. You see, the deaf have an intimacy with silence. It's there in their dreams. And the musicians turn to one another, not knowing what to make of the man, trying to calculate the distance between madness and genius, realizing that Beethoven's musical measurements could take you the distances, reaching past the towers of Babylon, turning the solar systems into symbols that crashed together, causing comets to collide, creating crescendos that were so loud that they shook the constellations until the stars began to fall from the sky, and it looked like the entire universe had begun to cry. Distance must be an illusion. The man must be a genius. Beethoven, his thoughts moving at the speed of sound, transforming emotions into music. And for a moment it was like joy was a tangible thing, like he could touch it. Like for the first time we could watch love and hate dance together in a waltz of such precision and beauty that we finally understood that history wasn't important, that to know the man, all we ever had to do was listen.
Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I have come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is often turned their bones. So let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus hath told you Caesar was ambitious. If it was so, were a grievous fault. And grievously hath Caesar answered it. Here, under leave of Brutus and the rest. For Brutus is an honourable man. So are they all honourable men. Come I to speak in Caesar's funeral. He was my friend, faithful and just to me. But Brutus said he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honourable man. He had brought many captains home from Rome, whose ransoms did the general's coffers fill? Did this in Caesar seem ambitious? When at the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff. Yet Brutus said he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honourable man. You all did see at on the Lupercal, I thrice presented him the kingly crown, which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition? Yet Brutus said he was ambitious, and sure, he is an honourable man. I speak not to disprove what Brutus spoke, but I'm here to speak what I do know. You all did love him once. Not without cause. What cause have told you then to mourn for him? O judgment, thou art fled to Brutus' beasts, and men have lost their reason. Bear with me. My heart is in the coffin there with Caesar, and I must pause till it comes back to me.
Well, I'm really not sure quite who at the end of this brief speech I'm going to choose, because I really genuinely, I don't think I've been in a position where so many really superb declamations have followed hot on the heels of each other and been so good in such different ways. So I hope through maybe talking through this with you, I'll come to some conclusion. But again, as I've said before, this will be wrong in many ways, and I'm sorry about that. We'll start with Anton. I thought this was, really captivating start, really beautifully controlled, really characterful, moments of real joy. It's that you could really sense the speaker's engagement with nature. I was kind of really transfixed. I was almost forgetting to write anything, and by the end I kind of realised I'd have to scribble some things down. But I thought your control of pace was excellent, really very good indeed. Well done. Not an easy poem either. Then we had Eliot doing Song of Achilles. There was a real sense of just a kind of natural storyteller, real passion, a real understanding of how stories work and how to tell them, and when to slow down and when to speed up and when to raise the volume a little bit. There's a great atmosphere in here while you were doing that we were being, told the story by a real proper storyteller, and I loved it. I thought it was just fantastic. You really communicated the importance of the important moments. That ending you dealt with brilliantly. Your enunciation was just spot on. Quite a rhythmic piece, actually. I hadn't really realised reading it through in advance, but you handled that really nicely. Some of the imagery you just brought completely to life. It was just, really heartbreaking as well at the end. I thought you handled that superbly. So, congratulations and well done. Then we had Agastya doing Blessing. Now, I, funnily enough, taught Blessing 3 days ago. Feels like you guys have been kind of just tracking my syllabus. And I wish, Agastya, you could come and read it to the boys I teach in the fifth form who are doing it for their GCSEs. Because your understanding of the punctuation, that control over the beginning of the poem, where you were waiting for the water to come, was just brilliant. This is another one where I forgot to write anything until right at the end, because I was so caught up with it. And this is a poem I read about 8 times a year because partly because I have to, because it's on the GCSE syllabus. But the momentum you got into it was brilliant. That opening line, particularly great. Well done. And then we had Anand, who did a speech a poem I've never come across. This was superbly crisp, just brilliant, really, really, spot on enunciation from the very first word right to the end. And it is a long piece to sustain that precision the whole way through. Perhaps fittingly, there was a real sense of crescendo. You managed the light and shade brilliantly, extraordinarily characterful for somebody so young to kind of inhabit a character like that. Really vivacious. Must be a temptation, surely, with something so long to blast through it, just to keep going and going and going. But you slowed down when it was necessary to do so. I was absolutely blown away. It was really brilliant. Well done. And then we had Montgomery doing Mark Antony's speech from Julius Caesar, and a great choice, a brave choice. This is a really popular Declamations piece. I thought you had great facial expressions. I thought you did that really nicely. There was, again, a very, very rapt audience here who felt like we had Mark Antony talking to us. And the subplots and the moments of those slight changes in arguments, the repetition, I thought you dealt with really well. Again, just like the Ages of Man speech earlier, I've got a real sense you understood what was going on. So well done. You also handled the iambic pentameter really well. So there were some great moments where all the stresses were absolutely as they should have been. So congratulations. I think I might have talked myself to an answer, but I promise I'm not just saying this. I'm really profoundly uncertain in this. It's a hugely strong group. So I'm sorry, but I am going to give it to Agastya for... I do apologise. I'm going to give it to Anand for Beethoven. Agastya, I thought you were brilliant, by the way. But I thought, Anand, you were absolutely superb. The crescendo was brilliant. Just congratulations. Well done. Up you come.
Inch by Inch, performed by Al Pacino. I don't know what to say really. 3 minutes to the biggest battle of our professional lives. All comes down to today. Either we heal as a team or we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen. Believe me. And we can stay here and get the crap kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell, 1 inch at a time. Now, I can't do it for you. I'm too old. I look around and I see these young faces, and I think, I made every wrong choice a middle-aged man can make. I threw away all my money, believe it or not. I chased off anyone who's ever loved me. And lately, I can't even stand the face I see in the mirror. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken away from you. That's just part of life. But you only learn when you start losing more stuff that life's just a game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. We're half a step too early or too late, you don't quite make it. Half a second too slow or too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and then everyone around us to pieces for that inch. We claw with our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we have all those inches, that's what's going to make the difference between winning, losing, between living, dying. I tell you this, in any fight, this guy's willing to die. He's going to win that inch. And I know, if I'm going to live anymore, it's because I'm willing to fight for that inch and die for it. Because that's what living is, the 6 inches in front of your face. Now, I can't make you do it. I'm too old. I look around. No, you have to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. And I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. And I think you're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team. Because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same thing for him. That's team, gentlemen. Either we heal now as a team, or we're going to die as individuals. That's football, guys. That's all it is.
Kubla Khan by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alf, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. So twice 5 miles of fertile ground, with walls and towers girdled round, and there were gardens bright with sinuous rills, where blossomed many an incense-bearing tree, and here were forests, ancient as the hills, enfolding sunny spots of greenery. But oh, that deep romantic chasm which slanted down the green hill athwart a scene cover, a savage place, as holy and enchanting as ere beneath the waning moon was haunted by woman wailing from her demon lover. And from this chasm, with ceaseless turmoil seething, as if this earth in thick fast pants were breathing, a mighty fountain momently was forced, amid whose swift half-intermitted burst huge fragments vaulted like rebounding hail, or chaffy grain beneath the thresher's flail. And mid these dancing rocks at once and ever, it flung up momently then the sacred river, 5 miles meandering with amazing motion. Through wood and dale the sacred river ran, then reached the caverns measureless to man, and sank in tumult to a lifeless ocean. And mid this tumult Kubla heard from afar ancestral voices prophesying war. The shadow of the dome of pleasure floated midway on the waves, where was heard the mingled measure from the fountain and the caves. It was a miracle of rare device, a sunny pleasure dome with caves of ice. A damsel with a dulcimer, in a vision once I saw. It was an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Abora. Could I revive within me her symphony and song, to such a deep delight would win me, that with music loud and long I would build that dome in air, that sunny dome, those caves of ice, and all who heard should see it there, and all should cry, beware, beware. His flashing eyes, his floating hair, weave a circle round him thrice, and close your eyes in holy dread, for he on honeydew hath fed, and drunk the milk of paradise.
Boris Johnson's speech from the CBI, 2020. Forgive you. Forgive me. There are only 3 countries that have more than 100 tech unicorns. And they are, as you all know, well, which are they? Let's see who's been paying attention to any of my previous. Which are the 3 countries that have more than 100 tech unicorns? Correct. They are the UK, the US, and China. And the wonderful thing about the more than 100 tech unicorns is they are now dispersed far more evenly across the whole of the country than the unicorns of some of our rival competitor economies. And that is an extraordinary thing. We want to see that same growth and development across the whole of the country. And that's why this government has doubled its investment into scientific research. And again, we want to see that same benefits of that research across the whole of the country. But in the end, and this is the most important message of all, there are limits to what a government can do. But I want to be absolutely clear about this because this has been an extraordinary time. We had the financial crisis of 2008, where the government had to intervene on a massive scale. Then COVID, where the government had to intervene on a massive scale. But the government should get out of your hair. and the government should implement less regulation and indeed less taxation. Because the true driver of growth is not government, but the originality and creativity and dynamism of the private sector. And Tony, I went, as we all should, to Peppa Pig World the other day. Hands up anybody who's been to Peppa Pig World. Not enough. I was a bit hesitant about going to Peppa Pig World, but I absolutely loved it. Peppa Pig World is very much my kind of place. They had very safe streets, discipline in schools, heavy emphasis on new mass transit systems, I noticed, even if they are a bit stereotypical about Daddy Pig. But the point I'm trying to make across here is the power of UK creativity. Who would have thought that a pig that looks like a hairdryer, or well, a sort of Picasso-like hairdryer, a pig that was rejected by the BBC, would now be exported to 180 countries, with theme parks both in China, the US, and the New Forest. A pig that is now worth £6 billion to this nation. 6 billion and counting. Now I think that's just wonderful. Don't you, Peppa Pig?
A Dream Within a Dream by Edgar Allan Poe. Take this kiss upon the brow, and in parting from you now, thus much let me avow. You are not wrong who deem that my days have been a dream. Yet if hope has flown away, in a night or in a day, in a vision or in none, is it therefore the less gone? All that we see or seen is but a dream within a dream. I stand amid the roar of a surf-infested shore, and I hold within my hand grains of the golden sand. How few, yet how they creep through my fingers to the deep. While I weep, oh God, I cannot grasp them with a tighter clasp. Oh God, I cannot save them from the pitiless wave. Is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream?
The Breakfast Club by John Hughes, and Andrew tells the reason he's in detention. Do you guys know what I did to get in here? I taped Larry Lester's bungs together. Yeah, you know him? Well, then you know how hairy he is, right? Well, when they pulled the tape off, most of his hair came off and some skin too. And the bizarre thing is that I did it for my old man. I tortured this poor kid because I wanted my dad to think I was cool. He's always going off about, when he was in school, or the wild things that he used to do, and I got this feeling that he was disappointed that I never cut loose on anyone, right? So I'm sitting in the locker room, and I'm taping up my knee. And Larry's undressing a couple lockers down from me. Yeah, he's kind of skinny, kind of weak. And I started thinking about my father and his attitude about weakness. And the next thing I knew, I jumped on him and I just started wailing on him. And my friends, they just laughed and cheered me on. And afterwards, when I was sitting in the head's office, all I could think about was Larry's father, and Larry having to go home and explain what happened to him. And the humiliation he must have felt must have been unreal. I mean, how do you apologize for something like that? There's no way. all because of me and my old man. Oh, God, I hate him. He's like this mindless machine I can't even relate to anymore. Andrew, you gotta be number one. I won't tolerate any losers in this family. Win, win, win! You son of a... You know, sometimes I wish my knee would give and I wouldn't be able to play football anymore. My dad, he could just forget all about me.
Well, this has been both pleasure and profoundly stressful. Sorry to have had to delay there. I have, again, changed my mind several times about many things, including who ought to win the special prize, who ought to win the overall, and who ought to win the sixth form. I'll start by talking through each of the performers in the sixth form, then I'll give them their sixth form prize, and then I'll come up with my adjudication. So, Nikhil, the Al Pacino speech, the Piece by Inches speech, is a very well-known, I think it's a pretty well-known one. Certainly, it's a great film. It's a really interesting choice. Lots of Radley boys do this for their declamation, funnily enough, and I thought you did it really, really well. And I think it's quite a hard speech, actually, despite it, on the surface looking quite sort of straightforward. You have to create this sense that there are a group of kind of guys who need to get behind you and who need to believe in you. And I thought you did that really, really well. You built the passion up really slowly, which is, I think, quite a hard thing to do. You controlled that nicely. I thought particularly the end, we got a real sense of you building to something, and it ended with us kind of absolutely wanting to follow you into battle. So well done, very good indeed. And then George, very different, the Kubla Khan, without seeming to do too much, which is really brave. I thought you just let your control and understanding of the meter and of the poem itself speak for itself really nicely, which is, again, really brave to stand still and just do a poem with just letting your voice do the work. And I thought it was great. You had superb control, I thought, and it was very vivid. A lot of the time really vivid, particularly because I thought you understood the meter so well. So a testament, because that's a very difficult choice. And then from that, we kind of veered off into a different direction with Ryan's Boris Johnson speech. And I think it's very difficult to do chaotic well. I know you did chaotic really, really well. And at times it felt, absolutely as it should, that you were kind of improvising. That you didn't know where it was going to go next, which I liked a lot, and I didn't want to feel like you were learning a speech. I wanted to feel as though this was something you were kind of plucking out of thin air. And I thought came across really, really well. And you were just the right side, for me, of impersonation. I didn't feel like you were doing an impression of Boris Johnson, but I felt like you had captured some of his spirit really, really well. So well done. Then we had Harrison, which was really powerful, I thought. It was kind of seeking, searching, very, very mature. I thought you understood the meter very well again, and the rhyme didn't get in the way of you building a really powerful mood and atmosphere throughout that poem. And again, to do Poe is, I think, hard because of the rhyme, partly. but you managed to communicate very, very clearly what the poem was about and built atmosphere for us. So well done. Another really interesting choice. And then we finished with George, and I was slightly trepidatious about hearing the speech from the Breakfast Club, because I think it's an interesting speech, and kind of interesting film to look back on. But you really inhabited the character brilliantly. I don't know whether that is your accent or not, but it certainly fooled me if it isn't. That was a brilliant performance. It felt really spontaneous. It felt like these were things you were thinking about. They were kind of atoms falling on the mind as you were talking, which is exactly what you want. And really moving. I thought you acted it brilliantly. I thought you handled the ending extremely sensitively. And I was actually very surprised by it, because I perhaps thought you had added to what was on the page, which is really hard to do. So very well done. Another tricky one to judge. I actually, in the end, I thought the one that perhaps spoke to me the most and I was most surprised by, so the one that I will end up choosing as my sixth form winner, was George for his John Hughes Breakfast Club extract. Okay, again, I'm going to do the special prize next, if that's okay. And this is for, somebody, I think it was very obvious I was extremely, extremely torn when announcing one of the particular year groups, and I thought this performance would have won, certainly would have done extremely well at the Radley Declamations semi-final I recently judged. It was just brilliant, and yeah, it was a very close run thing in the end, but my special prize would go to Elliot. I thought this was brilliant. Thank you. So, I'll just say very quickly that I have enjoyed myself enormously, and I don't say that lightly. It's not always an easy thing. It's not always a very pleasant thing to come and have to decide between all these very subjective, very different performances from such a talented bunch of boys. I often feel like it's a slightly kind of poison chalice. It's really hard to please everybody. So thank you all very much indeed for clearly having put hours and hours of time into not only learning the words, but thinking about how you were going to perform the words for us. You've got lots of your peers here. It's relatively kind of late on into the evening, and they have sat beautifully. And I hope that doesn't sound patronising. I go to a lot of events where a lot of boys make a lot more fuss about having to listen to people than you guys have. I think you've been really brilliant, so well done. And I would just echo the congratulations and thanks to all of you for taking part. At Radley, the best thing about Declamations is that pretty much everybody still does it. It really hasn't changed. So I'm really heartened to hear that all of you have contributed in one way or another by learning something. And I hope they stick with you. I've judged a lot of these Declamations, and I always hope that the things you've learned, you remain that they remain with you, and that in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, I work with a lot of old Radleyans who teach at Radley who can still do their Declamations if you ask them to. Which I don't, because I think that's a bit cruel. But if you can stick with these, it's a really valuable skill. So well done, all of you, and you guys particularly for getting up here. It's not easy. I get very nervous about this sort of thing. So for you, I can't imagine. Anyhow, I've bought myself enough time. I think I, in the end, decided that the overall winner this evening, for one of the most sort of impressive, stunning declamations I've seen from anybody of any age, and that sort of means that lots of the rest of you on any other occasion would likely have won this, but I just couldn't get over how good Anand was. So Anand, well done. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nash. Once again, I think you've done an incredible job. I know the boys have really valued your feedback, and I certainly did not envy any second of what you had to do this evening. So thank you very much. Give a round of applause for Mr. Nash.